Okay, you ready for my book superlatives? These are my 2020... Oh! 2022? What? Shows how with it I was when I made this spread. Alright, these are my 2022 book superlatives. A book I can't stop thinking about. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Baldree? Oh my gosh, you guys. The most wonderful little cozy fantasy book. Book that made me laugh the most. Finlay Donovan is killing it. I didn't expect to laugh so much at this book, but I found it, as a writer, I found it absolutely hilarious. Basic premise is that this woman is in a Panera and somebody overhears her talking to her editor about the novel she's writing, and they think that she's a murderer for hire, and they hire her to murder a man. Favorite short story collection, It's a Tie. Ruin by Kara Hoffman and Night of the Living Rez by Morgan Talty. I loved both of these. Ruin is basically a collection of short stories examining consumerism, consumption, capitalism. Night of the Living Rez is a collection of connected short stories about life on a Penobscot reservation in Maine. The most surprising fiction, Sourdough by Robin Sloan. I never knew what was going to happen in this book, and I loved that about it. Most surprising nonfiction, A Haunted History of Invisible Women by Heber and I can't remember the other author's name, and I have not written it clearly enough there, but it's a collection of stories about ghosts in America that are women. Favorite memoir. I read quite a few this year, and I really liked I Was Better Last Night by Harvey Firestein. It's a memoir about his life as a performer, and his life in general, but it's also kind of a history of the LGBT rights movement, which is amazing. The best YA I read this year was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I actually read it before and forgot I'd read it, but it actually really is very good. If you're like an outsider, you feel like you're different from everyone else, that's your book. The longest book I read was Dragonfly and Amber by Diana Gabaldon, which is in the Outlander series. The shortest book I read was We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie? Is that her name? But anyway, We Should All Be Feminists. Everyone should read that book. You can read it in less than an hour. It's very short. It's so good. I'll be back with a part 2 for the other half of my superlatives. Okay, part 2 for my 2022 book superlatives. The most life-changing nonfiction book that I read in 2022 was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I picked it up on a whim at a bookstore in Boise, Idaho, because I needed a book for the flight home, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. Everyone should read this book, and I mean everyone. Best witchy nonfiction. I actually didn't read a lot of witchy nonfiction this year, but I did read Traditional Wicca by Thorne Mooney. Loved it. Favorite romance I read this year was Patience and Sarah by Isabel Miller. This is an older book. It's from like the 60s or 70s, so it's and it's a historical fiction about two women who are falling in love in I want to say upstate New York on a farm. Beautiful. Book I recommended the most this year, The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. I have not stopped talking about this book or thinking about this book since I read it. I had no idea what it was. I borrowed it from the library based strictly on the cover and the fact that the second book in the series had been suggested to me quite a few times. Oh my god. It's a historical romance with some magic, a little bit of Monty Python-esque humor. It's hilarious. So good. The best knit-lit book I read this year was The Knitting Circle by Anne Hood. The best book with an LGBT main character that I enjoyed was Nirvana is Here by Erin Hamburger, which is it's a recent historical fiction, I guess. It's set in the 90s, I believe. Or no, it's set in modern day with a lot of flashback scenes to the 90s. That's what it is. About a boy who is really into Nirvana as a teen. He experiences sexual assault, and as an adult is dealing with the fact that his husband has just been accused of sexual assault. My favorite graphic novel that I read this year was Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson. I will read absolutely anything by Brie Paulson after reading Garlic and the Vampire. It is the sweetest, most comforting little graphic novel ever. And best witchy fiction that I read, Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. Honestly, I'd read anything by Alex E. Harrow. I also read 24 Doors of January, or I can't remember the name of it, something about January, one of her other books. Amazing book. Basically asking, what if the suffragettes had been able to fight for the right to vote by using magic? Okay, so I don't have time for a full video on like YouTube of my superlatives, but there they are. Those are my top books that I read in 2022 of the 101 books that I read last year.